Like the gentlewoman from Florida for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman Himes and Ranking Member Stile, for hosting this hearing today. Also, thank you to our witnesses for appearing before the committee. And first, before I begin, I would like to thank the chairman for entering into the record the Associated Builders and Contractors letter discussing the president's recent executive order requiring federal construction contracts greater than $35 million to be subjected to project labor agreements and its negative effects. I am very concerned about this harmful move, so thank you to the chairman for including that very important letter into the record. Now, while infrastructure has historically been an area where both parties have found common ground and agreement, that has recently changed. Rather than focusing on areas that matter to our economy and communities across the country, like roads, bridges, ports, broadband access, the term infrastructure has become the Trojan horse for leftist policy objectives like the Green New Deal. As you all know, infrastructure is widely viewed as an area for bipartisan agreement and cooperation. Both sides of the aisle view infrastructure, meaning roads and bridges, ports, broadband, as an essential role of the federal government. The federal government's role in developing and maintaining a national network of highways and bridges is traced back to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and was strengthened with the enactment of the National Interstate and Defense Highway Act of 1956. Since then, it's been an essential for the federal government and state governments to partner and to address the needs that exist throughout our country. Unfortunately, this administration has taken steps that betray this important relationship between federal and state. In a recent memo, the Federal Highway Administration sent an outline policy for distribution of grants and other resources under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This memo, entitled Information, Policy on Using Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to Build a Better America, applies a one-size-fits-all approach that will inhibit a state's ability to make the best decisions for their infrastructure needs by encouraging states not to build new highway capacity. I'll repeat that. They encourage states not to build new highway capacity. Specifically, the memo states, consistent with this policy, we will implement policies and undertake actions to encourage and, where permitted by law, require recipients of federal highway funding to select projects that improve the condition and safety of existing transportation infrastructure within the right-of-way before advancing projects that add new general-purpose travel lanes serving single-occupancy vehicles. While this may be the right solution for Washington, D.C., it certainly does not work for my home state of Florida. According to the latest U.S. Census, Florida grew by 2.7 million people, or 14%, over the last 10 years, more than double the U.S. average growth rate. And according to the Florida Chamber of Commerce, by 2030, it is estimated that there will be more than 150 million daily vehicle miles added to Florida roads. Meanwhile, according to the latest from the American Society of Civil Engineers report card, Florida's daily vehicle miles traveled has increased 84% since 1984, but the highway system lanes have only increased 25%. I think we can all see the disparity and discrepancies we have here. So rather than the top-down approach to infrastructure that the administration is attempting to push, these decisions should be made by those who know what's best at the state and local levels. Florida and other states know their transportation challenges better than anyone and do not need ideology-based or political-based solutions imposed on them by D.C. bureaucrats. This administration should and must reverse course immediately and leave these decisions where they have always been made, in the hands of our states. Now, Mr. Crabtree, I appreciate you pointing out that most of the energy infrastructure industry does not rely on government funding, but is funded by the private sector. From your extensive firsthand knowledge and experience in infrastructure, can you tell us how the federal government can best support or get out of the way of deployment by the private sector?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. Now, can you tell us how the federal government can best support or get out of the way of deployment by the private sector?
I think, in my testimony, especially about this, the permitting problem we have, I could go on and on about the projects that are not being built right now because of just the companies, some of them went bankrupt going through the permitting process. It's outrageous.
Thank you. Now, where you're from in Arkansas, it reminds me a lot of where I'm from in North Florida. And I gotta say, when my constituents have to get from point A to point B in an affordable, well-maintained road, it can be a little challenging at times. Is that something in your part of the country and my part of the country that we have in common?
Oh, exactly.
Okay. Would you think that an infrastructure bill like the one that is touted by this administration should focus on infrastructure that Americans care about, like roads, bridges, highways, rather than Teslas and light rails?
I believe, it would, especially in my industry with the aging of the pipelines and the lack of them, it was one of my first thoughts when the Colonial Pipeline was hacked. Why do we only have one pipeline servicing such a big part of the country? That's not right.
I appreciate your testimony, Mr. Crabtree, and thank you to our witnesses. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I know I'm over my time. I yield.
The gentleman's time has expired. I